Well, good day. Dr. Michael Fisher here. I'm with a guest today from Santa Fe, New Mexico area, and is a great leader in higher education alternatives, which is what I want to focus on. But this is the episode all about folly and wisdom. I'm glad you've joined us. I've had a few different guests on this program so far. This is episode 4. I've had a psychotherapist, long career. I've had a sociologist and historian. I've also had an Indigenous scholar and educator. And so, welcome, Virginia, today. Where
Thank
you,
you. Thank you
where are
for
you coming?
inviting me.
And where are you coming from? Where are you sitting right now?
I'm sitting in Nambe, New Mexico, which is about 30 miles north of Santa Fe, New Mexico.
Okay. Yeah, right. So, you work at where?
Southwestern College in Santa Fe, New Mexico.
And tell us a little bit about that and how you got there.
Okay, well, Southwestern College is one of those gems that not a lot of people are even aware that it's there. I grew up in New Mexico and I never knew it was there until I found it.
So, it's a real
And
university, right? It's a college slash
yes, it's a
university.
college. It's a graduate. We have graduate programs in art therapy and counseling, and we have a new program, which is a P. Well, it's fairly new. It's in its third year. The PhD in visionary practice and regenerative leadership. So we're branching out beyond clinical programs to include this leadership program, and our newest program is the Master of Arts in Transformational Teaching, Learning, and Leadership. And we also have the New Earth Institute. So we offer community professional education for mental health professionals.
Yeah, and so this master's degree seems like it's one of your babies, I think, with a few people. But the master's program, can you just, again, go slowly through its name? Tell us why you picked that name and how you got there.
Oh, I'd love to. So it's the Master of Arts in Transformational Teaching, Learning, and Leadership. Um, and the title really, what it illustrates is that, or conveys, is that the three really are important in transformational work. And not just in educational systems, but other systems engaging in transformational work, like nonprofit organizations, philanthropic organizations, social work, mental health, that sort of thing. So it's beyond, for me, beyond what we traditionally think of teaching in a K-12 or higher ed educational system. In my mind, anyone that does transformational work is first a learner and open to learning and growth and development, discovering the self in relation to others and the world. And then we're all teachers, I believe. If you're engaged in transformational work, you definitely are a teacher, guiding, mentoring, inspiring. That really comes into transformational work in a really powerful way. And then leadership, we're all leaders. I think a misconception when you hear the word leadership, many people don't see themselves as leaders, but actually, if you walk in the world, you are paving a path in some way or another, and therefore are a leader. So, certainly, in engaging in transformational work, that involves leadership and inspiring others, guiding others, paving the way, for others to do great transformational work.
And of course, leaders, teachers, learners make mistakes.
Absolutely.
So today is about folly and how folly can lead to wisdom. And another word I've often thought about folly, I could have called it foolishness and wisdom, or craziness and wisdom, and madness and wisdom. And I'm sure yourself, like myself, when we swirl in this world of alternative education forms, again, in the largest sense for all kinds of people, it's just really inevitable, and certainly in my life, that somebody somewhere along the road is going to say, "You're really foolish to do that. I can't believe you're still doing that or trying that in this time." Has anybody ever had the doubts of those kinds of phrases for you, and what did you do with it?
Well, first of all, I love the word folly.
Okay.
And I love how you kind of situated that in making mistakes. I think that's a really important part of being a teacher, learner, and a leader. Um, but yes, I've been called crazy for continuing to do the work that I do. And kind of like, it reminds me of the starfish poem where, the person's walking along the beach and someone kind of challenges them and says, "Why are you throwing those starfish back in the ocean? It doesn't make a difference. There's a million of them." And the individual says, "Well, it made it, throws one back in and says, it made a difference for that person." And so I think that that's kind of always my response is that, even if I make small differences and shifts and transformation in my really tiny, when you think about the span of the universe, sphere of influence, I feel like it's making a difference, even if it's a small difference. And I truly believe that small ripples lead to larger waves of change. And I think being a transformational teacher, leader, and learner, being a transformational agent,
Right.
um, requires resiliency, but also tenacity and also just faith in the work that we're doing, that it is going to make a difference. And that even if we don't see that difference, that
Mm.
we believe that we're making a difference. And I think that even when I think about like the educational system, when I train teachers and leaders, I often talk about having faith in the changes that we will not see in our lifetime, but that later in other lifetimes, those shifts will manifest.
Yeah.
And that's a really important part of being a transformational leader.
Yeah, and another way is some people might relate to the term visionary leader, and even some may relate to prophetic leader, or
Mhm.
people that have a vision that's not where the norm is. It's another way is thinking of we're talking about leaders, teachers, learners who they sort of see a little bit ahead of the curve of most people. Not always, but quite often. And so, what do we mean, or over the curve or around the corner?
Mhm.
They've kind of, for various reasons in their life, have been pushed, nourished, and sometimes accidentally dropped into pictures and visions of reality that are where a lot of people, most of the society is actually not seeing. And
Mhm.
so the word transformation is not a word you're going to probably hear in K to 12 education, for example, just off
Mhm.
the top. You might if you're lucky, but it certainly wasn't when I went to school. I doubt if it was when you went to school. So
Mhm.
why did the word transformation you think appear, and who's sort of a transformational hero that would have brought something in like that into your life?
Well, I think that we're afraid to say things in educational systems and other systems because they're not well accepted. So we prefer, just like we shifted from calling teachers to educators in an effort to professionalize teaching. When at the root of what teachers do, I don't think educator quite captures it. I think teacher
Okay.
captures it,
Oh,
right?
interesting.
But we've swayed away in that effort to professionalize and make teaching important, right? When it's already important. Um, so I think that transformation is a word that people are hesitant to use, and strategic and visionary are more acceptable terms. And I feel that it's important to disrupt that languaging and really get at the heart of what we're talking about. And so transformation for me is what we're talking about. It's about not accepting the status quo. It's about visioning, and thinking about possibility and reimagining
Yeah.
what our education systems could be like, right? Our various ecosystems in our world. And so when I think about transformation and maybe individuals that have inspired me and um, kind of capture what for me is transformational teaching and leadership, the first one that comes to mind is Paulo Freire. and his framework for liberation, and it being more about less about empowering and more about liberation. And I think that that's another word that we're hesitant to use in educational circles is, what does a liberating educational system look like, right? Because we're very focused on achievement and meeting standards and all of those things. And
Even empowering people can
by
be
the way,
still
yeah.
fitting in the system, right? Still fitting in the system. You're a great empowered person. Now do this.
Right, right, exactly. So his work really stands out for me as um, transformational, because the transformation comes from the individuals, not from without, or it's not done unto, which I think is really important in transformational work. We think, oh, we're going to save these people or these groups or this system, and we know we have all the answers and we're going to
Yeah.
help them figure it out, versus really sourcing the wisdom and the creativity and the people that are the authors of their own lives, and honoring that sacredness of, I don't know, I don't have the answers, but I can certainly come in as an advocate and someone a listener that can, bring my frame, right, of expertise and knowledge to this community that can be very liberating, right? So there's a humility in that.
So
The
that was
second
Paulo Freire, critical pedagogue. Who would be next that came along?
The next one is Parker Palmer.
Yeah.
Parker Palmer,
Title
for
of his
me,
famous book,
Courage to Teach.
Courage
Courage
to
to
Teach.
Teach, right?
Not
And
courage to become an educator.
that's right. He named teaching, and that is really, I think a sacred word, a very sacred word, right? And for me, the transformational perspective or lens that Parker Palmer brings is around looking at teaching as not just academic or intellectual. So getting us out of our head and into the heart of teaching, and naming the other aspects of being a teacher, which are, emotional and spiritual, and he talks about a three-legged stool, right? That without one of those, the stool topples over, and the stool being the work that teachers do, right? So if we're just approaching teaching, leadership, whatever work we do from a transformational frame, if we're just in our head, we're missing the boat.
Yeah. So bringing forward the learner, the teacher, and the leader was kind of your triad. And then
Absolutely. Mhm.
swinging that all within a transformation. There's this, I'm becoming aware listening to you that, you're talking about vision, having the ability to imagine, having faith. I'm just repeating some of the words you've used, right? And belief in
Mhm.
what might not be seen as a result that you can measure at some point, when we're doing this work of caregiving, leading, teaching. And then it's got this other part to it, doesn't it? It's like, be big, sort of the message, be big, and then be very humbled that your impact may be very small.
Yes, absolutely. I love that. I love how you captured that. It made me think also back to what you shared about the vision, right? Being able to see the big picture, maybe seeing things that others do not. And it reminded me, my mascot, I have some in my office, is the giraffe, because the giraffe can see the forest for the trees. And to me, that's good leadership, right? That they're always looking ahead and around and being very attuned to what's happening around them, right? Versus being, in a silo. And I think that's really important. That's the outward kind of glimpse of what's happening out there and around us. But I think really good transformational teachers and leaders understand their inner landscapes and what makes them who they are and what they bring forward, and even what aspects of our inner worlds can actually hinder the work that we do, the things that we have to work through, right? Um,
What would be examples of that?
Well, I think in transformational work, it's really important to understand what needs are being met in you through the work that you're doing, because then you're more focused on meeting your needs, right? So if you need to have this sense of being important or having power, right? That's what your work is going to focus on, right? Versus being very service oriented and that contribution that you want to make. That's why I think it's really important for us to understand why we're here, why we're doing the work that we're doing, and what contribution we want to make. Like, what are our innermost, deepest intentions versus what are our scars and our wounds, and how does the work kind of fill any gaps in our being that kind of maybe take away from that innermost contribution we want to make, right? So
Right?
we all kind of have wounds and trauma and needs, and we have to be very aware of those things so that we don't allow them to steer our work, that we allow our deep, very, very keen, very, very grounded in why we're here, what we want to contribute, and what is that inner acorn, like James Hillman in The Soul's Code. What is that inner acorn that's blooming inside of us that we will bring forth what we feel is the contribution that we want to make in the world so that we're very focused there versus on getting our own needs met. And that's a hard thing to do because we're human. And so just being conscientious of it, we can kind of make those small kind of shifts when we feel a little derailed so that we're focusing on what's important.
So it's small shifts within a big framework, right? And not losing that big picture just because something small didn't work.
Right.
Yes, you have to manage that. You have to fix that. You're a leader, you're administrator. I mean, you're right up there in the Southwestern, college as a very high level now administrator, and you've got all these challenges. Let's switch for a moment to your quotes that you brought, and we'll come back to your MA program and the birthing of it, and both maybe the positive sides, hard sides, difficult sides, but also the optimism you have today. And I just want to acknowledge all of what we're talking about today, so people are listening, is that being a transformative educational leader, particularly, but you don't have to be just that label. um, we're in a very difficult time in our world, and we just always want to acknowledge that. I know you know that, and when we move forward, whether we're in joy or happiness or idealism at times, does not diminish that we're unaware of or in denial of the incredible suffering that is going on the planet, and certainly in the country that you are in, particularly in the United States.
Mhm.
So on that acknowledgement, why don't you introduce your quotes and
Okay,
why? Give a little story behind them. Yeah,
before just what you shared just resonated with me, kind of that transformational framework. To me, it's really about being heart-centered and being humanistic in our approach and relational in our approach to teaching, leadership, or whatever it is, the work that we do and the contribution we want to make. So I just wanted to share that.
because we want you supported. If you're
Exactly.
helping people, we want you supported, because if you go down, everybody who's depending on you is going to go down, more or
Yeah,
less.
there's like a nurturing part of that too, and that's where boundaries come in, right? Where you're
That's right.
making sure that you're taking care of yourself so that you can take care of and nurture others. So that's really important. And that's something I learned at Southwestern because prior to coming to Southwestern, I didn't even know what boundaries were. It was just like this, hard work ethic,
Hard
produce,
work.
produce, produce, right?
Yeah.
Versus here where it's like, we get take care of self first. I think that's really important. And teachers need to learn that. Leaders need to learn that. So, all right. So the quotes that I chose, of course, are Parker Palmer quotes. And these are, when you said choose a couple of quotes, these are like seminal quotes for me. Like these are always in my radar. They guide, they ground, they serve as a compass. They come in to the work that I do, whether it's being an administrator or being a faculty member and teaching or being
Right.
a consultant or a trainer. These really are there all the time, and I can, in most cases, I can kind of regurgitate them pretty
Yeah.
accurately.
Okay.
But I wanted to, I actually copied and pasted them because I wanted to make sure I'm true to the quote. So the first one is
Just
good
tell us
teach.
who. Just tell us who
Oh, Parker
Parker is.
Palmer, Parker Palmer,
Who is he,
from the book The Courage to Teach.
and who is he? Just really briefly.
Um, he's an educator, teacher, someone
Quaker.
that,
Quaker.
yeah, someone that has made a huge contribution to the field of education as a whole and teaching as a profession. I call it a vocation, but just really naming the powerful, impactful work that teachers do when they bring their authentic selves to their work.
Yeah, and
Oh.
he started an institute. I know he got a huge grant back in the 90s
Mhm.
for an institute for teacher renewal.
Yes.
And that was based on his book, Courage to
Hmm.
Teach. It was based on his principles. And now they have a huge institute where they're supporting and nurturing teachers in renewal. And I think
Yes.
that's exactly what your program, the Masters, is. We'll
Hmm.
get to that. So now, thanks. The
Yeah,
quotes.
absolutely. Thanks for adding that. Yes, the Courage for Center for I think it's Courage and Renewal, but
I think so.
that's yeah, that's an important
I'll put links below.
initiative, yeah, of his. So the first quote is good teaching cannot, and you can substitute teaching with leading. I mean,
Caring.
right. Good teaching cannot be reduced to technique. Good teaching comes from the identity and integrity of the teacher. So it kind of speaks to some of the things I've already mentioned, that inner landscape, really being true to that inner landscape and the, that purpose, inner purpose that a teacher wants to contribute to the world and those they serve. So that again, it could be you could substitute teaching with leading. Um, and also that authenticity that we bring. I see new teachers all the time, going into the classroom and immediately wanting to emulate a good, what's considered a good teacher, right? And that's easy to do, or to assimilate into the culture and the norms of a school, and with that kind of need to fit in. So for me, this quote is about, you can learn all the skills, all the competencies, and still not be a good teacher because there's this dispositional piece that we all bring that makes a difference in terms of how we carry out our work and our practice. And also, to me, it's about staying true to our beliefs and not, letting go of those to fit in or to, prove ourselves or to show that we're good teachers. I feel like
Yeah.
we all come with this inner compass, and staying true to that, I think, is really important. And if we show up authentically in the classroom, we can't go wrong because we're bringing our full selves forward, our full authentic selves forward. My husband he's a retired engineer and he just took on a teaching gig. He's teaching sixth, seventh, and eighth at a small Catholic private school. And the words of advice that I gave to him the morning that he went to school, and he was terrified because,
Yeah.
here's
Never
this
taught
engineer that's
before.
going to go into this classroom with middle schoolers, was be yourself. That was my words of advice to him. So,
Right. Right.
um, the second quote, also from Parker Palmer, Courage to Teach, is what a fool I was to imagine that I had mastered this occult art, harder to divine than tea leaves, and impossible for mortals to do even passably well. This is a really, and I read it second because I think it builds on the first one, that, teaching is not something we master because we're working with human beings and we're working with ourselves and we're ever evolving. And so it is so important to have that humility that number one, teaching is sacred because we're impacting the lives of others, not just the students. And this is the same as true of being a leader, not just the students or clients, whatever organization we're in, but also it's kind of incremental, the impact that we have on the individuals we serve and then their families and their communities and the world, right?
So then you
So
put it into a cultural perspective.
hmm. Absolutely. So understanding that the impact that we're making is like it just echoes in time. I mean, it's not any small thing. So I think there's, the power, like I think teachers and leaders don't always recognize the power they have. Sometimes they feel disempowered.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sometimes they feel invisible and shut down, like the work they're doing is not really making a difference when actually every minute of every day they are making an impact, no matter how small. and that it's incremental. And so treating it as such, that we do have a tremendous power, and that we should treat our work as sacred because of that, and that we're never really gonna, there's no such thing as a consummate leader or the consummate teacher or the consummate counselor or the consummate social worker. We're always learning and growing and have to remain open to learning and growing because that's the way we serve others to the best of our ability. And if we stop learning and we think, oh, I figured it out, I'm a master teacher, we let go of the need to learn, which then I think hinders our ability to serve others.
You obviously have some practices that go with this philosophy that have fed your philosophy practices, and then philosophies that have influenced your practices, sort of in a back and forth kind of way.
Mhm.
Um, are there a few practices that you've tried and maybe early on in your career that you thought would be useful and they ended up being a bit of folly, and that eventually at some point you revised and maybe found some wisdom that could
Hmm.
come in the folly of what you were practicing, right? So it's like when you grab practices, they don't always work, it's like how
Mhm.
they think they might.
Yeah, I think reflective practice is what comes to mind, and I think reflective practice is kind of what underlies reflective practice is that desire to learn, like that openness to learning, and also being open to listening to, hearing, and integrating feedback. And so I think that can be difficult for some people because when we receive hard feedback, it's difficult, it's challenging, right? And I think what helped me around that was really trying not to tie my identity to my practice. And that can be a folly because if we tie our identity to our practice, when someone challenges our practices, we take it personally. Oh, you're saying I'm a bad person, that I'm not good at what I do. When we separate it out, it's like, oh, you're challenging this practice. You're not saying I'm a bad person. And therefore, we can let go of those practices, or we can refine them, or we can expand on them in a way that is more effective, right? And more impactful. And so I think that's something that I had to learn, because feedback is was hard when I was younger and getting feedback. It was like I took it personal. And so that hindered my ability to leverage feedback to improve my practice. But I think reflective practice is how we remain humble. It's how we continue to learn and grow and become more impactful in our practices. So,
Yeah, and I
and
know
I think part of that is also always reflecting on who we are as an evolving human being and what our growth edges are, what our strengths are, and being very grounded in that so that we are aware when those growth edges crop up in our work.
yeah, great. Now I know it's core, this self-reflective practice. It certainly has been in my background going back to the 80s and so on. It doesn't matter what career you're in, doesn't matter just being a person, just being a human being. It's so important. I think the folly, and I think you maybe were indicating it somewhat, I'll put different words on it perhaps, is that the problem with self-reflectivity taken to almost an extreme is it can be kind of a self-obsession as well.
Mhm.
So you're actually trying to distance yourself and have some objectivity, but it actually can work in a very subtle, subjective way to the point where you're reflecting on everything so much, it can all start to become paralyzing.
Mhm.
And in that open boundaried place of receiving, I'm supposed to be a self-reflective practitioner. I'm supposed to be open to feedback. I'm not going to identify with the feedback. There are patterns in people, some which will use that against you.
Mhm.
They will use your openness and your vulnerability to be a receiver of feedback.
Mhm.
So when you're young and inexperienced and haven't learned all those discernments about good feedback, good intentions, and feedback, yeah, it's hard, but I think the good intentions were good. Have you encountered that? Do you have any views on that?
Yeah, I mean, I can't think of a specific time, but I hear what you're saying, that we can be too reflective and there is vulnerability there, and people can take advantage of that, especially if they sense that you're not confident and you don't believe in yourself, right? So that
Right, right,
really kind of makes you pray, so to speak. Um, and so I think that's where, the inner wisdom, our inner compass, when we're engaging in reflection, which by the way, I think needs to be embedded in our work. It's not something separate we do. Like we don't carve out time in our day to engage in reflective practice, right? It happens, it flows naturally. And if it's like forced or you're obsessed with it, then that's not, what I mean by embedded across, our work. But I think that in that, it's not just reflecting outward and taking like these external cues and reflecting on those to inform our practice, but it's also looking inward and always trusting our gut, our intuition, because again, in our world, it's all about what's objective, what's, measurable, what's tangible. And sometimes the most powerful messages are things that come from our own insights, our own inner wisdom, our gut, and we have to trust those. We might not act on them immediately, but paying attention to it, and then over time, ah, I was on track with this sense
yeah,
that I was having,
yeah.
and then it helps us make really good decisions.
I'm just imagining a school board, that's questioning a school principal who's made some very maybe tough decisions about some case, right? School board's on them. There's some parent complaints.
Yes.
This is the leader, right? And all of a sudden, the leader's at some point sitting there trying to defend himself, and then at some point in the arguments, they just go, "Well, you know what? Um, I intuitively think that was the correct thing to do," and you just say it.
Hmm.
You're not,
Hmm.
you got to hear your input, but it's like, no, intuitively, I know that's where I made that from.
Hmm.
And you could say, well, it's from my experience and so on and so on. But they're going to, well, what's the empirical evidence that supports that decision making? This is
Right.
what I think you and I are speaking to here today. So
Hmm.
when you enter that kind of world of that interior, right, it's easy to be critiqued by other people as, well, that's just foolish, being intuitive or whatever, right? So we get criticized with that. I'm going to
Hmm.
go to an experience I had with my daughter when she was about 19 and just share with you. I'm curious what your response will be, because this is where a little bit of my folly as a leader and or perhaps wisdom. Let's see where he goes. I want your
Okay.
response. It's kind of fun. So back when she was 19, I was involved with her in this intentional community, and we had a lot of similar values. And I was really excited because, I'm her father, and she's kind of liking my value system. Generation gap wasn't too big, but that was back in way back, 2004. I just finished my PhD and so on. But I was working in this intentional community with her, and we were at the bus stop in this downtown Vancouver. And I never forget this. It's like, and she said, so, because she kind of always heard me talking about this project I have, this In Search of Fearlessness project. This is my vision, right? This is like my vision seed for my life. It came in 1989, so this is like 12 years later. And my daughter grew up with that sort of off and on. She knew dad's on a mission, like, he's not just a dad.
Hmm.
But she said it to me at the bus stop. She says, just calmly, but I could pick up the nuance of it. And it was like, so, Dad, do you ever think that might try doing something different than this project, of which you're not making any money, and you don't have a following, and you're
Hmm.
not famous?
Hmm.
And so, 19-year-old, right, questioning, and that was an interesting thing. And I joked in the moment because I had this response to other people. Well, you think you might try something different than this project you're on? It doesn't seem to be working all that great for you. And I'd say, no, it's working great. It just doesn't work great in this world. And so I said to my daughter in the moment, I says, yeah, I have thought of doing other things like selling shoes. Joke, joke, right?
Hmm.
What's your response to that? As someone who, again, a visionary leader who's taken a particular path. I'm not saying you've done that exactly the same, but What's
Well,
your
I was,
response to something like that?
my take immediately was tenacity. And again, that we continually strive knowing that we're acting in alignment with our innermost intentions, our inner compass, and we're not looking for external validation or results necessarily tangible, like, oh, I did this, so this happened, right?
Yeah,
Cause and effect, cause and effect. But we're in it for the long haul. And the true test of whether we're on the right path, if there is a right path, is is it in alignment with our innermost intentions, our inner compass? And if we can answer yes to that, then we're on the right path. And if we're looking for being famous and we're looking for money and we're looking for immediate results, that might be a whole different path than what we're on, right? And the path that we're on is really about being in alignment with our soul. And so that to me is the true test. And I get that, your daughter may be looking at success and looking at um, your path from a different lens, right?
yeah,
But returning to like impactful relational work that comes from the heart and is, the individual contribution we want to make, there's a whole different lens to look at that path through.
yeah.
So,
So what was pretty interesting, and just thank you, because we understand each other. Like she has like, an amazing understanding of what I'm doing
mhm.
at one level. Well, her career eventually, many years later, she's now a corporate lawyer in Bay Street, downtown Toronto, up in the
Oh,
35th
wow.
story,
Uh-huh.
right?
Uh-huh.
So she became a lawyer, which is the
Uh-huh.
total opposite of my direction.
Mm-hmm.
Yet we have this similar knowing. So I
Mm-hmm.
think we're kind of looking here. What I learned out of that, the wisdom of it is that, yeah, everybody still is going to walk. You may have the vision. You may have an incredible insight when I think of my daughter as one
Mm-hmm.
example,
Mm-hmm.
very early in age. But what she hasn't built is enough security and foundation.
Mm-hmm.
And I got my vision much later in life, in my
Mm-hmm.
30s, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm willing to make that risk. I'm not that
Yeah.
I had a lot of security, but I knew what it was like to live as an artist and a visionary. You don't expect to have a lot of foundation. But for a young person coming up, and especially with them looking at the future, being sort of in more and more insecure, I think you're also dealing with that with teachers. You're dealing with people who might come into your program, might want to do a master's, but they're going, I don't want to make the mistake of, spending that money. I don't want to take that risk. There's no job guaranteed. I can hardly guarantee a job now.
Mm-hmm.
Why would I take this master's program, right? That kind of thing. I'm sure you've thought about that in your curriculum design and pedagogy that goes with it. So, any responses?
Yeah, I think that this program appeals to people who want to experience personal growth. If we're
Not
thinking about
everybody. Not everybody.
not everybody, no. If you want to encounter, or you really want to lean into your own personal growth, because that's what, goes back to the good teaching cannot be reduced to technique, right? It comes from the identity and integrity of teacher. So this program is designed for that inner journey to really examine one's identity and what is the inner acorn that's there that brought you to whatever the profession you're in is. And how have you stayed true to that? How have you maybe been derailed from that for whatever reason? And how do you return to that? And how do you renew your passion for the work that you do? That's what this program really, really is about. And it's not like, many, especially teacher education programs, whether they're at the bachelor's degree level or the graduate or even the PhD, uh, tend to be very intellectual in nature and to be very skills competencies focused. And there is the rare program that really leverages the inner self as a way to learn, right? And a way to grow. And learning about the self as a foundation for learning about others and learning about what it means to be a good whatever it is you're striving to be.
Yeah. So how do we come to know each other as we're wrapping up here? Kind of an interesting connection. I'll just give you my story and see what your
Yeah.
story
Hmm.
is. So
Hmm.
my story is I joined with my wife, Barbara Bickle, the Visionary Practice and Regenerative Leadership Program, which is the doctoral program out of this Southwestern College, and that was 2023, so 3 years ago. And one of the things we had to do is design this course because we were going to teach one course in that program, and it was the doctoral dissertation writing proposal. And so we didn't know how to do online learning, and we had to learn from scratch how to design a course on online learning. So big learning curve. That was in January 2023. And then I remember we have to watch these videos, which are going to help you to get onto this program. And who is doing those videos?
That was me.
Virginia teaching away, and I'm listening to this person. Is she just totally into technology? And is this what she loves? But that's where I met you, and since then, I've come now to volunteer as a member of the faculty for the master's program.
Hmm.
So that's my story, and I'm curious, what your story has been in meeting me.
Well, I didn't realize it was the video. So yes, technology is one of my passions, and I love doing how-to videos because I think
Okay.
we learn visually versus like text-based instruction solely. So I've become known as the queen of how-to videos. So, and I think they're fun. But when I think about how we connected, I think of like divine synchronicity and synergy and I know I've told you this before, Michael, but I think it's almost like you were the spirit guide that just kind of appeared and was like the perfect person to be a thought partner and so the fact that you were willing to and you were passionate enough about this program to be a part of the visioning of that program and part of the implementation of that program was just such a blessing and such a gift. So I just feel like it was meant to be, and we were meant to connect. And I also, I don't know if familiar with the book Sacred Contracts. I forget the author of the book, but the concept is that we all have sacred contracts to fulfill, whether it's a 5 minute interaction with a person or whether it's a lifetime. And Michael, I know that our connection, our shared path goes beyond just Southwestern College.
Yeah.
Um, take this as an example, this interaction that we're having. I'm excited about the work that you do and love to hear about your journey. I love that you share, your little kind of highlights along the way and just feel honored to be a part of that. So, and also very open to what will emerge beyond just this kind of context of Southwestern College. So.
Yeah, and just to refine that a little bit, the kind of phrasing I think I was thinking about this morning is, I've met a lot of leaders. I've been an executive coach for some leaders and so on and so on. And I said, Virginia and I don't really know each other that much, like, a few exchanges here and there. But I
Mhm.
said, this person has an amazing trust in what I am about, like without really knowing, and I don't meet too many leaders like that. I can tell you, like it's extremely rare. And then I thought, well, I wonder if it's this kind of feeling which I also have in my leadership work and who I connect with is there's just these rare few people you meet sometimes that I feel like we're connecting at this, and you used the term and I've used it as world soul level that is so far and beyond all the surfaces of what our connection is. And you just, there's something cooking in a sense in the pot of where this world soul is going. So I know you use that word sometimes in your teaching as a leader. And can you just share a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I use soul in terms of like soul's calling. So it really kind of alludes to that inner compass, that inner acorn. But also that in through our interactions with the world and others, like there's this, and our one of our founding directors, Catherine Ninos, talks about this term all the time, uses this term all the time, kind of the oversoul. So there's this oversoul of things that we do and people we interact with, and when we gather, it's more than about us individually, but more about the collective. And when we come together in community to do work, whatever it is, learning, teaching, leading, that we have to really honor that oversoul that kind of encapsulates the work that we're doing and lifts it, right? And paying attention to the sacredness of those connections and the people, the souls that have been brought together to do that work in the first place. So it just speaks to who we are as interconnected beings versus separate beings, and the energy and the synergy that creates, that oneness creates, and being aware of it, and the sacredness of it. And I think there's a humility in that as well, that, when you come together with other individuals like you and I have today, or, small groups or even larger groups, that you are really basking in the magic of the collective.
Yeah. So I think another term that we can use, like certainly you don't have to be religious or even spiritual to be interested in what we were talking about today. Even if we use that language at times, that's certainly not the framing of the program on this master's that we're talking about, nor even the visionary practicing a PhD at Southwestern College. But you will feel this ambiance in the literature. You look at the website, right? The program materials, you will feel this ambience of this oversoul, this quality of like to call it sometimes just the collective, you use collective caring
Mhm.
field.
Mhm.
There's a caring field that is sacred, as you say. It's beyond us as individuals. It's beyond the content. It's beyond the degree. It's beyond all those technical aspects, functional aspects.
Mhm. Mhm.
And that takes time to nourish, doesn't it? To when you can find that place, again, it just shows you have to really know thyself so deeply. That is the path that goes back in our ancient philosophies of, the whole entire world, really, all the traditions of wisdom traditions is know thyself. And that means thyself, not the small self only, but, this kind of idea of thyself, the capital, the spiritual, if you wish,
Mhm.
the divine, whatever language people use, so that greater other, right?
Yeah.
So I think the last thing I just want to mention is that people are coming here, coming to you and I, or they're going to listen to this, and they're going, what is going to be the advantage in the kind of world that we live in today that is so terrifying for so many people and is crumbling in many ways, the social
Mhm.
net and the future? How do you address that? And I use the idea, well, you're coming to a learning community. Keep that in mind. Like that's what is going on here.
Mhm.
And we don't want you out there alone.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that this work is needed more than ever, right? Educators or counselors or social workers, philanthropists, that are really seeking to make a difference. That's transformation in my mind. And respond to the needs of the communities they serve. There's this kind of individual work that needs to be done, that inner journey. But our program is kind of structured into realms, right? There's the journey within and the journey without, right? And I think that journey without is equally important, that you are interacting with others who also want to make a difference. And now more than ever, there's a need, and it's going to continue to be that way for years to come. The disruption that's occurring right now is going to be here for a long time. When something is wounded, that wound stays and it eventually heals, but then there's always the scar, right? And so there's this intergenerational nature of the turmoil and the chaos that is occurring today. So into the future, many, many years, this work is going to be even more needed and has always been needed. But um and I think that what people will get out of being a part of this is hope, I think hope is so incredibly important because when we lose hope, we give up and we aren't as creative in our thinking. We're not as visionary in our work. And when we have hope, and it goes back to what I shared earlier, having that faith that the what we are doing now will make a difference into the future. So I think this gathering of the collective and this oversoul is also about cultivating hope in ourselves and cultivating hope in others and the collective.
Well, thanks very much for this today, Virginia.
You're welcome. Thank you. I always feel so invigorated after I've had a conversation with you. So it's like
Well,
so effortless.
that's what I
Um,
love.
the
Effortless is
time
great.
flies. It's just like, wow, we've been on for an hour.
Yep, that's right.
Yeah.
So I will look forward to our further connections in the new year here, and all the best to you and yours and the program. I will put links below for all our viewers today to access this program, access a few of the other authors that we mentioned today and where we got the quotes from. Um, Good day and have a good one.
Thank you, Mikael. All right. Take care.